Good day. My name is Troy Campo and I'm here to report about the Chapter 2 Medico-Legal Autopsy. So let's start. First is the medical examiners. So medical examiners are typically physicians specializing in forensic pathology. So forensic pathology, they study the structural and functional changes in the body of in the body as a result of injury. So medical examiners, they are particularly in charge of studying or examining the cause and manner of death of corpses in cases of suspicious deaths. So they are the central character in the forensic investigation of crimes involving victims. So because they are the one that can reveal the possible death, the possible cause of death of the victim, or they can provide valuable information to aid the investigators for the progress of the case. So, forensic examiners have main responsibilities. So, one of the main responsibilities of the forensic uh, medical examiners are first is the conduct an autopsy in case of death. So, medical examiners are the one that in charge with the diligent investigation and rigorous examination of the body of a person who has died sudden, unnatural, unexpected, or unexplained or suspicious death. Next is examine medical evidence and laboratory reports. So they examine medical evidence to create laboratory reports for the information that they get. So this is very helpful to our police investigators and prosecutors on the case. Next is they analyzes victims' medical history. Also, they aid police and prosecutor on the case. So they aid police and prosecutor by playing an essential role for criminal justice authorities and the general public. The findings they get when compiled are very valuable in determining trends in mortality. The next slide is the forensic scientist. So forensic scientists provide scientific evidence for use in courts of law to support the prosecution or defense in criminal and civil investigations. So forensic scientist is intended to be used in court because scientific evidence can be very powerful. So the forensic scientist must be accurate, methodolic, method, method, methodical, detailed, and above all, unbiased to the information they get. Next is a forensic scientist apply scientific analysis in legal context and play vital role in solving crimes. So they play vital role because forensic scientists conduct the most appropriate tests or analyzes and document the process in particular type of field. So afterward, the forensic scientists interpret the result and write clear, concise report documenting the steps followed to reach the followed to reach this conclusion or opinion of the forensic scientist. So so they are very important in solving crimes because they are the one that apply scientific analysis. That is nowadays very helpful because of the advancement of the technology. They can use this to to identify hidden information in the crime scenes. Next is there are many broad field in the science in the of science. Uh, Broad field of science. There are many sub areas in the forensic science. So first is the pathology. So pathology deals with the examination of bodily fluids and tissues, semen, blood, skin, hair. Uh, so all in all, they are the one examine the biological evidences. Next is toxicology. So toxicology is the science of the study of poison, including drugs. Next is the odontology, centers on the study of teeth. Then psychiatry deals with the study of human mind. Then anthropology, the study of humanity through the application of biology, cultural studies, archaeology, linguistics, and other social sciences. So medical examiners can call all these type of forensic scientists who are expert in these various fields to aid for the investigation. So for example, there are suspected poisoning involved in a crime. So the medical examiners can call toxicologists, which are expert in the field of studying poison, including drugs. So toxicologists can identify and distinguish any drugs or poison present in person's bodily fluid, tissues, and organs. So, for example, forensic odontologist is called when needed to scrutinize or uh, examine teeth of identified bodies when other identification is not obtainable. So that's the case where forensic odontologists can aid to the investigation. So if nothing, nothing, not, nothing identification is available to obtain in the scene, so they use the teeth to identify the victim or the suspect. So next is forensic anthropologists. They are skilled in identifying the sex, height, weight, and ethnic group of a deceased person from incomplete body. Also, they are very helpful in uh, identifying body that incomplete. So or body that is decayed or decomposed for many days, that the victim or the dead person cannot be identified. So forensic anthropologists, they are skilled in identifying the sex, height, weight, and the ethnic group of person. So all in all, they can aid to the identification of important pieces of information in the case to reveal what happens to the victim or what is the cause of his or her death. So the forensic scientist will at some point have to testify or become expert witness as, as opposed to the ordinary witnesses. So they are the expert witnesses that are permitted to testify not just about what the result of the testing or analysis, which are um, they are expert witnesses that are permitted to testify not just about the result of the testing or analysis, but also give an opinion about what those results mean. Next is the examination of evidence. Medical examiner must probe several dissimilar types of violent crimes to determine whether a violent death was an accident, suicide, or murder, homicide. So in all cases, medical examiner must carry out a thorough investigation of the crime scene to determine the cause of death of the victim. So also they examine the evidences in the body through performing post-mortem examination of the body of victim's body. So they are the one that that examines body to determine the cause of death of the victim, or to identify possible helpful evidence in the victim's body. So examining evidences in different cases. So in gunshot wound cases, medical examiner looks for gunpowder residues on clothing of the victim around wounds. So, in the gunshot wound cases, the information gathered through the examination of the residues in the clothing helps to identify how far was the gun when the victim was shot, or to know if the gun was fired by the victim or someone else. Because in gunshot cases, it is difficult to identify who shot the who shot who shot the gun, or how long the distance. So this type of examination is very useful to identify who used the gun, or who shot it, or who shots it, or to identify how long the distance the gun is being shot. So in knife wound cases, the examiner must distinguish cut and stab wound. So in knife in knife cases, there are knife cuts. So in the knife cuts, the injury is longer than it is deep, and in stab wounds, which is the injury is deep, then the injury is deep, and the so in stab wounds, the injury is deep than it is long. So this will help to identify the mode of actions of the suspect in attacking the victim. Next is the examiner also looks for defense wounds and hesitation wound. So in situations that the suspect attacks the victim, there are cases that the victim uses a self-defense. So defense wounds, these are the indications of the victim taking hold of the knife for protection. So mostly you can see defense wounds in the arms, where the victim uses to defend himself. So hesitation wounds are indications of these hesitation wounds are indications of suicide rather than homicide, consisting of single deep gash. So so the hesitation wounds is so these superficial hesitation wounds are superficial parallel cuts indicating repeated and hesitant trials before the person was able to make final deep cut. Next is the in case of asphyxiation. So examiner is called upon to look for death from lack of oxygen in the blood. So the process of asphyxiation is a process of being deprived of oxygen, which can result in the unconsciousness or death. Because of little or no oxygen can be delivered to the organs of the body, including brain, it will cause death. So that is the asphyxiation. So the reasons that resulted asphyxiations are: first is hanging accident or non-accident. So hanging is the intentional or non-intentional killing. Hanging is intentional killing or also non-intentional. So if intentional killing, it is of oneself, it is suicide. So by a suspension from an anchor point, such as an overhead beam or hook, by a rope or cord, or by jumping from a height with a noose around the neck, often considered to be simple suicide method that does not require complicated techniques. So mostly hanging is the most common type of suicide. So, mostly people uses this type because it is very simple. You just use a rope, and then you can use that to hang yourself. So next is reasons resulted asphyxiation or suicide, homicide. So for example, asphyxiation can be caused by the replacement of oxygen in the red blood cells by another gas, manifested in the cases of carbon monoxide. So these are manifested in the cases of carbon monoxide poisoning, which can be a result of suicide or homicide, and also can also result by accident. So if no marks in the body, so it is usually uh, taken as a sign of suicide. Whereas in the presence of tools around and grease on the victim's hands indicates that it is an accident. So with the presence of wound caused by a blow to the head, with absence of carbon monoxide in the blood of the victim, would pinpoint to attempt, making homicide look like suicide. The next is the strangulation. So this can be either manual with the use of hands, like open, or with a ligature. So usually in manual strangulation can be easily traced by examining fingernail abrasion or bruises from the assailant. So in the neck, you can observe the strangulation is manually is if the strangulation is manual, there are traces of fingernail in the neck or abrasions or bruises. Next is the technique of forensic science. So forensic science make use of sophisticated laboratory procedures. So forensic science use advanced methods in identifying evidences, or they use high-tech machines that can recognize uh, anomalies in the crime scene or in the situation, different types of situations. So first is to establish whether alcohol was involved in crime. So in detecting if the alcohol is involved in crime, they there are two ways to measure the amount of alcohol in the blood. So first is they use alcohol breath testing devices. So these devices is very accurate that the results are capable of providing evidence to court. So it is often used by our traffic enforcers to detect if the drivers are uh, under the influence of alcohol when driving. So it is like a gun that you can then you blow at the tip so that your breath go inside to detect if the if the if you're if you are uh, under the influence of alcohol. So this is a brief this is this measures how breath testing devices measures how much alcohol is in the air you breathe out. So as I say earlier, you will breathe to the tip of the breath testing device, then it will measure how much alcohol is in the air you breathe. So the device uses the measurement to estimate how much alcohol is in your blood. Next is to establish whether alcohol was involved in crime. We can test it through we can test the blood through gas chromatography. So this type of testing uses blood sample then vaporized by then it will vaporize by high temperature in the gas, then sent through the column that splits various chemicals in the blood. Also, this type of method can detect different kinds of drugs in the blood. So, as you can see in the picture, it's like the movies that spin rapidly, then it can detect various chemicals in the blood. Next is in the situation when body is discovered in the river, lake, or stream and other bodies of water. Then and when the lungs are filled with water. So if the victim is found in the bodies of water, there are possibility that the victim is not drowned in that area, or the victim is drowned elsewhere, not in the bodies of water. So by the use of this typical microscope, it can magnify 1,500 times the size of it can magnify 1,500 times the actual size. So so it is only typical microscope that you can see in the laboratories. So this can help to recognize diatoms. So diatoms are single-celled algae that can only be found in natural bodies of water. Since this type of organisms are filtered in the household waters, if there is no trace of diatoms in the body, when microscope is used to sample fluids, then the drowning, so then it can be identified that the drowning incident is not occurred in the area where it's found. So, for example, if the body is found in the water and there are no diatoms found in the body, then maybe the victim is drowned elsewhere or in the bathtub or sink, then the body is thrown away after the person is drowned. So the body is thrown away in the river or lake after the drowning in the sink or the bathtub. To cover they this to cover up the crime. So it is a way of criminals to deceive the investigators. Next is detecting the gunpowder particles on hand of a person. So by the use of scanning electron microscope, so this type of microscope can magnify 100 times. So it is used to detect gunpowder particles on hand of a person that recently shot a gun. Also to pinpoint their origin from particular bullet. The next is the forensic investigation of substances found at the crime scene can establish the presence of suspect at the scene. So one of the oldest methods is the dusting the scene for latent prints. So spreading fine powder over the surface with brush. So by the use of spreading fine powder over surface with brush or magnetic wand. So mostly we have a different types of fingerprints. So we have unique patterns of fingerprints in our fingers. So so if the investigators identify the fingerprints, it is a very important information to connect to the suspect. So there are also fingerprints that not visible in the naked eye. So investigators use forensic investigators use fine powder over surface to reveal the fingerprints. So the powder adheres to proteins from the sweat glands on the skin ridges of fingerprints making it more visible and transferable. So, the next is the integrated automated identification system. So it is for the fingerprint identification. So this type of machine is the high-tech one. So because it allows to record fingerprints digitally and to transmit and receive information electronically for rapid identification by the help of the integrated automated identification system. It is automatic type that easily identify our fingerprints in by the use of computers, etc. The next is the evidences may include blood, hair, semen, or skin. So DNA. So in the evidences, in the evidences, that is blood, hair, semen, or skin, we can find our DNA in that biological evidences. So the DNA allows scientists to identify whether the blood, semen, or other biological evidences belong to the victim or suspect. So DNA can be found in the person's blood, semen, semen, hair, and skin. So if there are evidences left in the crime scene, which is blood, uh, hair, skin, semen, uh, in, forensic scientists can compare it to the victim and to compare it to identify whether they belong to the victim or to the suspected attacker. So the next is the PCR, or polymerase chain reaction. So PCR can duplicate or multiply the DNA from small sample. This produces an adequate amount of DNA to compare the sample DNA from suspect or to the victim. Next is the DNA fingerprinting. So the employment of DNA for identification is called DNA fingerprinting. Next is human bite marks as circumstantial evidence. So scientists can fill up the bite impression by liquid plastic. So the cast may usually forensic odontologists are the one that aids in helping to to identify bite impressions. So they uses liquid plastic. So the cast made that is perfectly copied to the bite impression in crime scene that can compared to the teeth of the accused. So that's all. Thank you.